The bell tolled at dawn. A sound that should have marked a peaceful morning instead sent cold waves of fear through the village. In the square, rumors were already running faster than the wind. Someone had been accused of witchcraft. And not just witchcraft, something darker, something unspeakable. They whispered of lust, of forbidden acts, of unholy desire. In the late medieval and early modern periods, accusations of witchcraft were rarely about magic alone. They were a weapon, sharpened by fear, superstition, and envy, and coated with something even more poisonous: sexual suspicion. This is the story of how desire, real or imagined, became a deadly charge. How the human body, particularly the female body, was transformed into evidence of evil. And how communities used sexual accusations not only to control individuals, but to police the boundaries of power, faith, and gender itself. Imagine living in a world where a glance could doom you, where being desired by the wrong person, or desiring anyone at all, could cost your life. In the frenzy of witch hunts, lust itself was treated as proof of pact with the devil. And it didn't matter if you were guilty or innocent. The accusation alone was often enough to destroy you. By the 15th century, Europe was changing rapidly. Plague, famine, and war had scarred the land. The church, desperate to hold its moral authority, preached that unseen forces were at work: devils, demons, and their human servants. Witchcraft was no longer just a folk belief. It became a theological crime. But something else happened, something insidious. Witchcraft became sexualized. Manuals like the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, written in 1486, warned that witches, especially women, were seduced by the devil himself. They were accused of lying with demons, of corrupting men, of destroying fertility. Every act of female independence or defiance could be painted as lascivious and diabolical. This was more than religious fear. It was control. Sexual accusations were a convenient way to humiliate, discredit, and eliminate anyone, especially women, who stood out, spoke too freely, or simply attracted envy. When witchcraft trials swept through Europe, courts obsessed over questions of the flesh. Did the accused consort with Satan? Did she meet him in carnal form? Even questions of ordinary relationships became sinister. Was she tempting men to sin? Did her beauty itself come from demonic powers? Consider the case of Alce Young, the first woman executed for witchcraft in the American colonies in 1647. While little is known of her life, contemporary accounts suggest she was targeted partly because she did not conform to expected female roles. In Europe, similar cases multiplied. Women who were widows, healers, midwives, or simply too independent were often accused of using sexual charms to control men, a charge that blended fear of women with fear of sorcery. For male victims, the accusations took a different turn. Men accused of witchcraft were often said to be servants to female witches or to have been seduced into devil worship. The underlying theme was always the same. Sexuality outside rigid norms was dangerous, shameful, and punishable by death. Theologians of the late Middle Ages insisted that witchcraft required a pact with the devil. And what better way to frame that pact than as a physical, intimate corruption? Trial records describe interrogators asking women whether the devil appeared as a handsome man, whether he lay with them, whether he left marks upon their skin. These witches' marks, any blemish or mole, were presented as proof of diabolical intimacy. The accused were even told that pain-free spots on the body, areas that didn't bleed when pricked, were signs of demonic lovers. Sexual shame was a tool of control. In societies obsessed with female chastity, to accuse a woman of sleeping with demons was to strip her of honor and humanity. Whether she was young or old, beautiful or plain, it didn't matter. The accusation alone placed her beyond sympathy. Take the trial of Katharina Hennet in Cologne in 1627. She was a respected postmistress, accused of witchcraft after a series of political disputes. Though there was no evidence she ever practiced magic, rumors of unnatural desires swirled around her. Her independence as a businesswoman was seen as unnatural in itself. Therefore, she must have had help from dark powers. She was executed, her reputation shattered by whispers of sin. Why were women so often linked to sexualized witchcraft? Medieval theology painted women as morally weaker, more susceptible to temptation, and naturally lustful, a dangerous mix when combined with popular superstition. The Malleus Maleficarum spelled it out. Women were said to be insatiable in carnal lust, more easily swayed by the devil, and eager to seduce holy men away from virtue. This was not merely theory. It became courtroom practice. Inquisitors frequently asked obscene questions, pressing the accused for lurid confessions. Did they attend Sabbaths where orgies took place? Did demons visit their beds at night? For judges and priests, the witch hunt became not just a battle against heresy, but an excuse to probe the most intimate details of women's lives, and to turn those details into crimes. The paradox is chilling. A woman could be accused of witchcraft simply for attracting desire, yet the very process of investigation forced her to describe that desire in humiliating detail, reinforcing the lie that she was guilty. Even when executions did not occur, sexualized accusations carried brutal consequences. Public shaming, being paraded through the streets, placed in stocks, or forced to wear mocking signs, often accompanied witchcraft charges. These punishments were designed not just to hurt, but to humiliate. A woman accused of enticing men with witchcraft might have her hair shaved off, a symbol of lost beauty and dishonor. In Germany and Scotland, some women were forced to undergo invasive, witch-pricking exams, where officials searched for the devil's mark on their naked bodies. These acts were not just tests of guilt. They were calculated to degrade. For communities, such spectacles were a warning. Stay in line, or risk the same fate. Fear kept people silent, even when they doubted the charges. And because these accusations played on shame, the victims' families were often too embarrassed to defend them. Behind the language of sin and lust, witchcraft trials often hid very human motives: jealousy, rivalry, and power. When crops failed or illness spread, villagers looked for someone to blame. An attractive young woman might be accused of bewitching husbands. A wealthy widow might be said to have slept with demons to gain her fortune. Even nuns and priests were not safe. Rivals could accuse them of unholy liaisons as a way to remove them from office. One striking example is the case of Urbain Grandier, a French priest executed in 1634. Though male, his enemies accused him of seducing nuns through witchcraft. The charges were entirely fabricated, born of political conflicts, but they centered on claims of lust and demonic pacts. The pattern is clear. Sexual accusations were not only about morality. They were weapons to destroy reputations, seize property, and settle scores. As witch hunts reached their height in the 16th and 17th centuries, the sexual element became more extreme. Pamphlets and sermons painted lurid images of witches' Sabbaths filled with carnal excess, feeding the public imagination and stoking fear. Ordinary people came to believe that witches used sexuality to spread evil, poisoning marriages, corrupting children, and even striking men impotent. In some cases, men who felt humiliated or rejected accused women of witchcraft to explain their own failings. It was easier to claim "she bewitched me" than to admit personal weakness. These stories reinforced the idea that sexuality, especially female sexuality, was inherently dangerous unless tightly controlled by church and community. The witch became the ultimate cautionary tale, a figure of uncontrolled desire punished by fire and rope. They whispered it first in kitchens, markets, and churchyards. A woman's glance lingered too long. A neighbor's wife bore a child after years of barrenness. A man's livestock failed while hers thrived. Suspicion, once a thin thread, could be woven into a noose. Sexual accusations gave the rope its strength. They were irresistible to accusers because they shamed as they destroyed. By the 15th century, witchcraft trials were taking root across Europe. Manuals like the Malleus Maleficarum, written by Inquisitors Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, urged judges to view witches through a lens of lust and corruption. They insisted women were weaker, more carnal, more likely to make pacts sealed with obscene acts. And though many men also faced trial, it was women, poor, outspoken, widowed, or simply unlucky, who bore the crushing weight of these charges. In villages from Germany to Scotland, The mere suggestion that a woman used her body in service of the devil was enough to unravel her life. Accusations rarely relied on tangible evidence. They rested instead on gossip, on an offhand remark, on a rival's envy. If a man spurned a woman, she could be branded seductive and unnatural. If she rejected him, she might be called a scornful witch who cursed his bed. The courtroom became a theater of humiliation. Judges and inquisitors did not just ask whether a woman practiced harmful magic. They probed into her private life, her marriage, her childbirth, her touch. The questions themselves were weapons, framed to make any answer dangerous. If she protested innocence too strongly, she was defensive. If she wept, she showed guilt. If she stood silent, she confirmed suspicion. Consider the case of Anna Goldie in Switzerland, executed in 1782, often called Europe's last witch. By then, Enlightenment ideas were spreading, yet old fears clung stubbornly to life. Anna was accused not only of poisoning but of bewitching a child in ways the court described with dark insinuation. The implication was not merely that she used magic, but that her womanhood itself was dangerous. Her presence in a household, unmarried and unbound by a man, invited the dirtiest speculation. Earlier in Germany, entire villages witnessed public shaming rituals. Women were marched through streets wearing iron masks shaped like leering faces, symbols of supposed sexual sin. Others were displayed in pillories while townspeople jeered and hurled filth, their humiliation meant to prove the devil's grip. These punishments were not only about rooting out witchcraft, they were about controlling bodies, especially female bodies, and reminding communities who held power. The link between witchcraft and sexuality was not an accident. It was engineered. By framing witches as lovers of the devil, authorities created fear that reached into the bedroom. No one's marriage bed was safe from suspicion. If crops failed, if a husband strayed, if children fell ill, someone must have tempted or cursed them, and that someone was usually a woman on the margins. The trials served multiple purposes. They satisfied personal grudges. They reinforced clerical authority. They allowed rulers to claim they were purifying society. And they disciplined women who stepped outside the roles prescribed to them. Midwives who eased childbirth pain were accused of consorting with dark forces. Widows who lived independently were said to seduce demons. Even young girls, barely old enough to understand the charges, were accused of attracting spirits with their unholy beauty. In Scotland during the North Berwick trials of the late 1500s, women were said to have kissed the devil under his tail. A deliberately degrading claim, meant to shock audiences and strip the accused of dignity. These lurid images were circulated not because they reflected truth, but because they served power. They made witchcraft seem both terrifying and obscene, justifying harsh punishment in the name of public safety. The accusations spread faster than any plague. And once a woman was named, her chances of survival plummeted. Neighbors testified to strange noises or unfamiliar herbs. Former friends spoke of odd glances or sudden anger. Men described temptations they imagined were not their own fault but the devil's snares, laid through her. Even children were coached to tell stories of nighttime visitors whispering in their ears. Under torture, many confessed to impossible crimes. They spoke of flying to secret gatherings, of feasting with demons, of lying with spirits they did not even believe existed. The inquisitors recorded every word as proof that lust and witchcraft were one and the same. In truth, the confessions revealed more about the fears of society than about the women accused. In France, England, Italy, and beyond, the pattern repeated. Fear, shame, trial, execution. Sexualized imagery painted witches as not just dangerous but filthy, their bodies twisted by sin. This narrative reassured communities that they were purging evil, while reinforcing narrow, obedient roles for women. Even when trials ended in acquittal, the damage lingered. A woman accused of using her charms to ensnare men or corrupt children rarely found peace afterward. Her reputation was ruined. Her family lived under suspicion. The whispers followed her until she moved away, or until someone tried again to destroy her. These were not random bursts of madness. They were organized campaigns of control. The church, secular courts, and local leaders all benefited from witch hunts that targeted sexuality. A fearful population was easier to govern. A silenced woman was easier to ignore. By labeling desire itself as dangerous, they made ordinary human instincts seem like proof of the devil's work. But resistance grew. Scholars began to question the logic of confessions gained through pain. Physicians doubted the tales of demons. Lawyers argued that witchcraft, if real, could not be proven by rumor alone. Over time, as trials faded, people came to see how accusations of lust and witchcraft had been wielded not to protect communities but to police them. The legacy of these centuries lingers. Even today, echoes remain in how societies treat women who do not conform, who are called temptresses, troublemakers, or worse. The witch hunts remind us how fear can twist justice, how shame can become a weapon sharper than any blade. The story of sexual accusations in witch hunts is not just about the past. It's about power, the power to define what is pure, what is sinful, what is punishable. And it warns us that when fear and prejudice are given authority, they will always find someone to burn.